Hey everybody, I'm super bummed that I can't be in class to teach you this lesson because this is one of my favorite lessons. But we're going to go through the history of fashion. You're just going to watch this video of me going through the PowerPoints. It's not going to be the same as if I'm teaching it in class because, let's face it, I'm sick as a dog laying in my bed and I don't feel well, so I'm going to kind of go through it quickly and probably without a lot of personality, and I apologize for that. Also, speaking of dogs, my 3 dogs are with me and they're being very annoying. So if you hear them bark or you hear me curse at one, just let it happen. So the first thing I wanted you guys to do before we do this lesson is I wanted you to take the quiz in Canvas. It's a little link that takes you to a BuzzFeed quiz called Which Decade Do You Belong In or something like that. It's a little sexist, so I apologize. It does ask you your favorite nail polish color to wear and stuff like that. It's definitely geared more towards that, but just take it anyways and have fun with it and see what decade your personality belongs in as far as fashion wise, and then come back here and we'll go through this lesson, and then I'll give you your assignment. So let's get started. So let's start off with the 1900s first. It was a very, very modest time, I guess you can say. This was the kind of fashions that were popular. Men wore 3-piece tuxedos and women wore very, very full petticoats and dresses. The Gibson Girl, this is a sketch. This is not a real person. She was a sketch done by somebody that they basically said this is the epitome of beauty. This is the true definition of what beauty looks like. And so this is not a real person. This is just an ideal that women followed. So society placing standards on women on how to look started all the way back in 1900, so don't feel bad that you're still facing it today. The Gibson Girl was what every woman tried to look like: the big poofy hair on top of on your head in a bun, the big bust line, the small tiny waist, the S curve of the body. This is kind of what women kind of achieved to look for. That's when the S curve came into place. It's the silhouette, and it was a very soft curve with softer shoulders, less restrictive corsets, and the bustle never returned. Let me show you an example. The picture on the left is a bustle. The picture on the right is the corset. And so the bustle, which was just on the back of the gown, and so it made your butt look bigger, was dropped, and they adopted the S curve, which then cinched in your waist and crushed your organs and made you very, very curvy, and it made you look like the letter S. Here's some examples of women in corsets trying to achieve the S curve and the Gibson Girl look. The 3-piece suit was for the gentleman was introduced, and the suit was relatively non-constricting. I mean, as much as a suit can be, with a sack coat, simple vest, and pleated trousers. In the Titanic is set in 1912, and so this is a really good example of the Gibson Girl look and the S curve. You can see how the women's dress reflects that. This is Rose with the bouncing curls on top of her hair and the S curve corset with the dress. It even has a scene in Titanic, if you've seen it, where the mother is tightening Rose's corset, and it's actually a pretty I wouldn't say emotional as in crying, but it's kind of a darker scene. Kind of the mother explaining to Rose her responsibilities to marry rich and that kind of stuff. The bicycle was also invented in the 1900s. Life began to move at a faster pace with many new inventions, such as the telephone, electric light, and the automobile. It gave people more luxury and freedom. The new 2-wheeled cycle was the craze of the country. So women couldn't really ride bicycles because of the way that they dressed. So Amelia Bloomer designed a practical outfit for the avid cyclist, consisting of a tunic dress worn over loose trousers, gathered at the ankles. Later, this was revised into a split skirt with gathers under the knee called bloomers. Amelia Bloomer created the bloomers so you could ride a bicycle, so women could ride bicycles. Here are some examples of that. The sketch on the right shows kind of a fashion sketch of what it looks like. The picture on the left is a photo of the women riding their bikes with the bloomers. Then we have the bathing suit. It was created in the 1900s for women, and it was It was introduced by Annette Kellerman, and it shocked the world. As you can tell by the little cartoon sketch, this swimsuit was very risque, and it was very, what was the word? Immodest for the world, and they were very shocked to see women dressing in these risque swimsuits. Insert sarcasm here. Here are some photos of the women's swimsuits being used. It was very attractive. Then we have this lovely image on the right of this woman in her swimsuit, and then the two men in their sexy little swimsuits. Here we have another picture of women in their swimsuits. This is called a bathing machine, and what would happen is women could not show their flesh to society because it was obviously considered very, very wrong. And so what would happen is they would come and they would get into these bathing houses, and they would change into their swimwear, and then they would roll the bathing house down into the water, and the women would jump out and they would swim around, and then they would get back in the bathing house and be rolled back up onto shore, where they would change back into their street clothes, and so no one would ever see their exposed skin. In the 1910s, men and women wore dust coats to protect their clothing when driving or riding in cars. Back when the first automobile was invented, there were lots of paved roads weren't really a thing. It was a lot of dirt roads, and so when the cars would drive on them, a lot of dust would obviously be brought up, and so men and women wore dust coats to protect their clothing when driving or riding in cars. Then we have one of my favorite creations. Not really. It's called the Hobble Skirt. This was created in 1910s, and it was designed by a French designer named Paul Poiret, and he broke the new rule of freedom by designing the Hobble Skirt. He was like, ha, women have swimsuits. They can show their elbows. How dare they? And so he created, this is one of my favorites, and it's called the Hobble Skirt to let women know that they were never actually free. The hemline was so narrow that women could only take very tiny steps in them. And the Pope actually saw these and got angry, and he spoke out in defense of the women. So Poiret split the skirt to the knee, bringing a response of outrage from the public because it was split to the knee. So it's like, women, you have to have freedom, but not too much freedom. It's never allowed. Here we have some examples of the Hobble Skirt. They look so uncomfortable. Here's some good movies that represent the 1900s and 1910s. If you ever want to see kind of what life was like and kind of see fashion, it's really good to watch these time period movies. That's my dogs. It's really good to watch these time period movies because they portray the fashion and the lifestyle pretty well. In the 1900s and 1910s, some movies that represent those are Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland. Who plays Dorothy in Wizard of Oz, and then Anne of Green Gables. Some movies that represent the 1910s would be Anne of Avonlea. It's a continuation of Anne of Green Gables, and then Titanic, obviously, is one of my favorite films of all time, and that took place in 1912. So World War I comes to be, and it saw fashion come to a standstill with patriotism at an all-time high. During and at the end of the war, the barrel silhouette comes in. It's a baggy dress / jacket combination that made women look large and droopy in the chest. Here's an example of the barrel silhouette. So then we have the women's movement demanded the right to vote, wear makeup, cut their hair short for the first time in a bob style, and wear skirts above the ankle. So this was a really, really huge time for women because they finally were able to have a little bit more freedom in their choice of what they could wear, how they could portray themselves. They had the right to vote. It was a big deal. And there is a movie that actually, it's based on a play. So if you're in theater, if you are a theater fan, you've probably heard of it or seen it. And it's called Thoroughly Modern Millie. And the opening credits is a great example of how women are kind of becoming more liberated. And so I'm going to show you guys that video clip. Maybe. It just needs to load.